All right, it's game number 51 for the Boston Celtics, their fourth and final game of the West Coast road trip over in Denver, where they'll take on the Denver Nuggets. Welcome back to the Celtics pregame report. I apologize for being MIA. I know, much like a lot of you out there, I caught a really bad cold, which kept me out of commission for the last few days, but I'm back now. I got the Nuggets beat writer of Mile High Sports and co-host of the Nuggets Daily podcast, Brendan Vogt, here with me to break down this matchup between these two teams, which I think is going to be a very good game. Probably going to come down to the wire. And with this podcast, I'm going to make up for being out for the last few days. So no pressure, Brendan. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, brother. Glad I could be here.
Celtics certainly have their hands full tonight, like I said. I mean, facing a talented group in Denver, a team that's certainly in the playoff picture of the Western Conference. They have 5 players averaging in double figures in points, and that's not including Paul Millsap, who is still working his way back from a wrist injury. So when he does come back, this team could be just as better as anyone is expected heading into the regular season. 2 questions, Brendan. 1, which player has impressed you the most this season from this Nuggets team? And 2, when can we expect to see Millsap back in action?
So number one, that's a tough question. I'm sort of torn between 2 answers here. The 2 guys I think that would come to every Nuggets fan or writer's mind are Gary Harris and Jamal Murray. I'm going to go with Jamal Murray because his evolution has been on display of late. This is a guy who was drafted to be a dynamic scorer for Denver. He's not necessarily a traditional point guard. He's sort of lacking in that playmaking duty aspect, but man, this guy can light it up. And after having a lackluster rookie year, he was only 19. He's come out here in his sophomore campaign and he's shooting 45% from the field. He's got that 3-point shot up to 37%, and he's showing a lot of ability both off the bounce and a spot-up shooter. So you talked about Denver as a team that's well-positioned to be as good as anyone once Millsap comes back, once this core gets a little older. A lot of that is contingent upon Murray developing into a dynamic scorer.
Yeah, heading into that draft class, that was a name that's definitely came up around these parts, the draft where the Celtics eventually took Jaylen Brown at the 3rd pick, but, there was Murray, there was Buddy Hield, and of course there was Jaylen Brown, who they ultimately decided to go with. I've seen some strides out of the young guy. I mean, I definitely had a close eye on him, especially the first season, because I was still a League Pass subscriber at the time, and I really was intrigued by that draft class because I felt like this was a class full of players that was going to take them a couple of years to develop, and Jamal Murray certainly falls into that class.
Absolutely, and he looks well ahead of his age in terms of the mental game. This dude is a cold-blooded killer. He is a competitor, and we saw it in that Portland win earlier this week. He went toe-to-toe with Damian Lillard, who we all know as an elite guard and an elite finisher in the 4th quarter. The Nuggets have really lacked a go-to guy. You mentioned Paul Millsap's been injured. Jokic, who's probably their best player, is not really an alpha male, aggressive type of player in terms of looking to get his own shot. So the Nuggets have been desperate to have someone step up and say, give me the ball when it matters most. He scored 10 points in that game against Portland in the 4th quarter alone, including the go-ahead bucket and free throw, and he scored 38 points on less than 20 shots in that game. So Malone lauded him as a guy who's only 20 years old, but he wants the ball in the key moments, and that is something Denver's going to need going forward.
It's interesting that he's been the point guard for the Denver Nuggets all of a sudden, when they had another guy in mind, in Emmanuel Mudiay, who put on a clinic at TD Garden last season. He scored about 19 points in the first half, and it looked like he was going to make his strides too, but that certainly hasn't been the case. What exactly happened with Mudiay's development in your eyes, and what do you think transpired between then and what we're seeing now?
That's a fascinating question, man. It's one a lot of Nuggets writers have been trying to get to the heart of. I wrote an article about the Emmanuel Mudiay experience for Mile High Sports just about a month ago. This is a guy who has all the athleticism in the world. He's a guy who played really well professionally as a teenager in China, and he's a guy who can turn the corner with the best of them, and he has the physical tools to play the point guard at the NBA level. But he seems to be lacking in awareness. Not just his shot selection, but this is a guy who I think is a little too reliant on his athleticism. He doesn't really formulate game plans first, right? So he sees a lane and he drives to the hoop. He hasn't really thought about what he's going to do if the defender rotates. He hasn't thought about making the extra pass. And it results in a lot of sloppy turnovers and missed shots at the rim, which are like the worst type of missed shot. Having a point guard blow a layup, those lead to a lot of transition fast break points for the opposition. So it's essentially a turnover. So this is a guy who was drafted to play point guard, but he can't protect the ball and he's not finishing at the rim. So he fell out of the rotation, and as we know in this league, confidence is everything. So when you're talking about a young guy like Mudiay, a guy who's used to excelling at virtually every level, I think that's been the problem. I think he can't really get into a rhythm. Every time he plays well, he struggles in his following performance, and he's been exiled to the end of the bench, and I think it's really hard to sort of see yourself as a baller and get into any sort of rhythm when your team doesn't have confidence in you.
This edition of the Celtics pregame report is brought to you by DraftKings.com. Head over to DraftKings.com and use the promo code CLNS for a free sign-up with your first deposit and a shot at a share of $10,000 in total prizes. That's DraftKings.com. Use the promo code CLNS and get paid. So I'm looking for an outside perspective on this one. Marcus Smart had a freak accident in LA. An LA hotel had stitches done to repair lacerations to his hand after punching a picture frame, and I'm using air quotes right now. He says, is now going to be out of action for the next 2 weeks. I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking this, but my question is, could this be the beginning of the end for Marcus Smart in Boston?
Wow, that's an interesting question, man. I hadn't really extended it that far. I don't know. Marcus Smart this is a perfect marriage, right? Marcus Smart is a guy who can't really shoot, but he does all those other things to help you win games. Boston is a team that not only benefits from that, it's a team where they can survive his lack of shooting. So yes, this is a guy who's going to be tempted to see what kind of money he can make on the market one day, but I don't know. Personally, I think he should stay in Boston. My question to you, man, because I'm not a Celtics insider, do you know why he punched this picture frame? Was he upset with something related to the team, or?
There is no details coming out. I mean, the story, when the story first dropped, it was from Brad Stevens, who said he was going to investigate and find out more about it. Next thing we knew, there was a statement from Marcus Smart saying that he punched a picture frame, and he didn't say exactly why. Obviously, before he made the tweet, we knew things were bad because he got sent home to Boston right away. The team sent him to not only get treatment for his hand, but I think it was more of a disciplinary thing, you know, and they just didn't want him around the team. Also, around that time span, the team had just had a reported meeting heading into their game against the Clippers. So I don't know. I don't want to jump to conclusions here. I don't want to say that maybe the frustration from that meeting is the reason why he punched the picture frame. There's also a Instagram model who put him on blast for all kinds of things that had nothing to do with basketball. And so who knows? Maybe he got frustrated because of that, you know. But we'll have to wait and see if details come out from this story. It's a funny story. It's weird.
It's interesting, man, because I was in the Nuggets locker room last night after the Mavericks win, and you'd think after a win there'd be a lot of excitement in there. There's a couple of individuals, I don't want to air out their laundry, but they seemed kind of upset, and I don't know if it had anything to do with basketball, but it just made me think, and I was thinking about this with Marcus Smart. We really forget as fans often to think of these guys as humans, right? Who knows what they have going on in their personal lives? They're robots that we ask to play basketball as far as we're concerned from our couches, so that's been one of the things that's my eyes have really been open to since I started covering the team, is that on a day in and day out basis, these guys go through things just like you and me.
Right.
Sometimes I wake up in an awful mood. So I think we try to tie it all back to basketball, but yeah, you never know what's really going on with these guys.
And it's such a long season too. I mean, you know, from traveling city to city. I mean, and as they say, this is that time of the year where sometimes players are just kind of sick of, you know, the travels, or they get frustrated with each other or being around each other all the time. I mean, it's the dog days of the NBA season, as they say. So maybe the All-Star break will do everyone some good. All right, speaking of the All-Star break, I mean, the All-Stars were announced. I love this whole new format. I'd love to hear your take on it. But first things first, I have to ask you the obvious question, the question that gets brought up every single year around this time throughout the NBA season. Which players did you think got snubbed before, obviously, what happened with DeMarcus Cousins? I mean, now we know that Paul George is going to be taking his place. That's one guy. Is there any other player in your mind that you think should have been announced?
Honestly, man, I try not to get too concerned with the All-Star stuff. I mean, there's so many good players in this league, and the way it's broken down by position, there's always going to be guys who get left out, right? So Damian Lillard, we know, was really upset that he had fewer votes than Lonzo Ball, right, with the fan vote. And that stuff's always going to happen. The fans are often sort of misinformed when it comes to this stuff.
Right.
I don't know, man. I don't really. I'm cool with all of the selections for the most part.
Me too, man.
I do.
Me too.
Yeah. I mean, I do think the NBA would stand to benefit from, I don't know, trying to find a way to ditch the East-West format, to try to be a little more fluid with the positions in terms of who's voted in, and to just, you know, in my opinion, it should really just be like the best 20 players in the league. And I know that that's a hard thing to pin down, but so when you're talking about snubs, you always have to ask the following question: if this guy's out, or if this guy's in, then who should be out? You know, and that's always really, really tough, especially when it comes to guards. There are so many talented guards in this league, especially out west. It's just hard to sneak in there sometimes.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely. All right. Last question. I end every single pregame report with this question. Brendan, who wins tonight? Prediction time.
I got to go with the Celtics, man. The Nuggets are a very, very good team at home. They're 19-6, but we know how well the Celtics travel. And I like a rested Celtics team. I think the Nuggets played really well on the road in Boston in that loss the last time these two teams played. But things are in disarray, dude. For a team that has won 3 games in a row in Denver, the mood in the locker room was a tense one last night. Guys are feeling the pressure, and the Nuggets really seem to struggle with consistency, approaching every game with the same mental approach, playing for 4 strong quarters. They've won 3 games in a row. This is a team that I don't think is going to win or lose more than 3 games in a row many times throughout the course of this season. So I would not be surprised if Kyrie Irving and the Celtics come into town and get a win tomorrow night.
All right, he is Brendan Vogt. You can give him a follow on Twitter at bvogt. That's VOGT422. That is his Twitter handle. Again, you can find him on Twitter at bvogt422. And check out his work, of course, for Mile High Sports. He covers the Denver Nuggets, and he also has a podcast. You can check out Nuggets Daily podcast. Hey, I appreciate it, Brendan. Thank you for checking in, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Anytime, Joshua. Thanks for having me on, dude.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Celtics pregame report. Make sure you check out the Celtics postgame show on clnsmedia.com. You can call in toll free at 347-215-7771 to join it. Or you can just check it out like the same way you can check out this show, and that's on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app. Weekday shows air on the Celtics Newsfeed channel, on iTunes, Stitcher, and the CLNS Media mobile app. For today's Boston Celtics pregame report with Joseph Pavone, this is Joseph Pavone signing off.